Uncle Dan.
Hey there.
What's in a name?
A rose by any other name would smell as sweet.
It's like when Homer Simpson changed his name to Max Power.
You right?
Or
we should just see if we can do a whole show just in stupid aphorisms.
We could.
Yeah.
We could do it.
Well, I think Uncle Mark's got a character to talk about whose name may or may not have to do with their character, but it's certainly a name that I wish I had.
Yeah, it's a pretty awesome name. So I do want to talk about it. He is a fairly fascinating and obscure man, and I want to talk about him as a gateway to a less fascinating and not at all obscure man, and how silly, even utterly false ideas can get blown up into a whole mess of garbage that can fuel dangerous modern mythologies if we aren't careful. Doesn't that sound fun?
Yeah, but it doesn't sound very likely. I mean, nothing I've ever witnessed would indicate that that's true.
And it's pretty off-brand for our show.
This is where the judge says, "I'll allow it, but you're on thin ice, mister." So first to the fascinating and obscure guy, he by the name of Manly P. Hall. Yeah. Who, despite being manly, was thusly described by the LA Times in 1923. Quote, "He is tall with unusually broad shoulders, football shoulders, but he wears his curly dark brown hair bobbed like a girl's, and even his face and eyes convey an almost feminine impression." So make of that way.
It was a simpler time.
It was a simpler time.
God.
Maybe he picked Manly to kind of help deal with what he saw as his feminine attributes. So Hall was born in Ontario, Canada in 1901. He was sickly and frequently out of school as a boy, which gave him time to pursue his own voracious reading habit. He never met his father, and the grandmother that raised him died when he was 16, necessitating his move to Los Angeles, California, to live with his long-absent mother in 1919, who, as it turns out, was an avid Rosicrucian.
Yeah, we still haven't done them, have we?
I know. They keep coming up, and we've never actually gone right at them. So, and Rosicrucianism was a recently founded, for the time, esoteric Christian order steeped in ancient mysticism. Already very much interested in such things from his own readings, Hall jumped in with both manly feet. It seems he never attended even a single day of college. Yet by the age of 23, by the age of 18, he was giving lectures in downtown Los Angeles in something called the Church of the People. And by 1923, he was ordained as its main pastor. In addition to his oratory skills and 3-book-a-week reading habit, he was a prolific writer as well, publishing scores of pamphlets and books on ancient signs and symbols, esoteric philosophy, and one of his defining obsessions, Freemasonry.
You know, Uncle Mark, I was about to say, speaking to his 3-book-a-week habit, I was literally about to say, just imagine if you had nothing to do but sit around and read books. And then I thought hard about the last year and how much I failed at that.
I know. I think I read 2 books this past year. It was such a failure. So just a few years later, at the age of 27, this precocious young mystic wrote what would be his definitive tome, a slim 633-page book with the catchy title of An Encyclopedic Outline of Masonic, Hermetic, Kabbalistic, and Rosicrucian Symbolical Philosophy, being an interpretation of the secret teachings concealed within the rituals, allegories, and mysteries of all ages.
I read that.
Yeah.
Clearly he was paid by the word.
Oh, no, I was thinking of Ethan Frome. Never mind.
Yeah, known more commonly as the secret teachings of all ages. And it is a pretty breathtaking work in its scope of subject matter, from astrology to a treatise on the tarot, alchemy, myths from across the world, the secret meaning of symbols, a substantial survey of religions generally, Hebrew mysticism, Egyptian geometry and architecture, the true meaning of Shakespeare, and naturally Rosicrucianism and Freemasonry, all illustrated by his lifelong artist and friend collaborator, J. Augustus Knapp, who you should look up. One article I read described him as the esoteric Norman Rockwell. Quick aside, the book was pre-sold to people, the total cost being $100, which in the America of 1928 was a lot of clams, with a down payment followed by installments, and based just on his popularity as a young intellectual master of the great mysteries of the past, it was kind of a huge underground success. He sold a ton of them, but this great work was largely ignored by the critical press.
Rude.
So basically, looking back at the secret societies, mystical cults, Eastern religions, and philosophies of the world, Hall seemed to believe, well, all of them. I should note most of what can be found online about Hall, other than his own prolific writings. He wrote 150 books and essays in addition to his giant book of secrets, is by modern author Mitch Horowitz, who is a great writer and historian, but he also seems to be quite a bit of a Manly P. Hall fanboy, so I've tried to take his views with a bit of a grain of salt. But according to what I can find, Hall believed that all of these ancient wisdoms, ideas, and symbols were of great importance, even in his own time, and had much to teach us. So he was sort of out of the school of Helena Blavatsky's Theosophical movement, which has come up more than once on this show, most especially in episode 52. Blavatsky's ideas are pretty loony. There's lots of stuff about Atlantis and, of course, Lemuria and where the races come from and how they fucked different animals to degrade. And not just a little bit racist, as the whole esoteric movement of the late 19th and early 20th century is loaded down with Western chauvinism and esoteric fascism. Yet the author Mitch Horowitz defends Manly P. Hall from any such prejudices.
Of course not.
Of course, he's a good guy. But the thing about Hall's writings that is most germane to today's segment is that he was a peculiar sort of American nationalist. A high-ranking and devoted Freemason himself, Hall believed America was the deliberate creation of Masons and other secret orders as the next step in human social and spiritual development, and that America had a secret destiny that God had ordained. As several of the founding fathers were actually Masons, like Washington and Franklin, and the real intellectual power behind the founding of the country were Enlightenment political philosophers like Jefferson and Paine, he had an argument. I think most people would argue it was as much an economic enterprise in the preservation of profits derived from human enslavement and the exploitation of stolen land for profits that they didn't want to share with the distant king. But sure, let's go with a dedication to spiritual freedom and human liberation. and in this devotion to his vision of America, the obviously brilliant Hall could be a little careless with his sourcing and facts. In 1944, Hall published a book called The Secret Destiny of America. That it was a short book, especially by Hall's own standards, will be of importance here. In this book, he turgidly describes an incredible moment that, quote, took place in Philadelphia on July 4th, 1776. Our august forefathers were locked in heated debate and woe over the grave consequences that would likely face them should they take quill in hand and sign the Declaration of Independence. So fraught with danger were these proceedings that the room and the building were locked and under heavy guard. Yet into this body of men, very well known to each other, appeared a stranger. He took to the podium and in stirring oratory beseeched the fretting, bewigged men not to worry so much about the disposition of the heads those wigs rested upon, to screw their courage to the sticking place, and he finished with, God has given America to be free, in Braveheart fashion. So the formerly floundering fathers...
Or Ted Cruz fashion.
The formerly floundering fathers founding flung themselves feathers first upon the Declaration, scrumming like Roman senators trying to get a stab at Caesar in order to sign the thing. And when all the ink was spilled and dried, they looked around the room, and the stranger was gone.
Oh, no.
Whoa, right?
And that stranger was Ichabod Crane.
Well, now, Mormon listeners will no doubt see this as evidence of this mysterious stranger as being one of the three Nephites, as discussed in episode 39. But most astute listeners will see this story as evidence of bullshit.
Nothing. Yes. Yeah. Evidence of nothing.
Yeah. And minutes of those meetings were fairly well kept. So where did the big brain Manly P. Hall get this amazing tale? With some digging, Mitch Horowitz found it had come from an obscure collection of patriotic folk tales published in 1847 called Washington and His Generals and/or Legends of the Revolution by a weird friend of Edgar Allan Poe, a guy by the name of George Lippard. Not George Peppard, who played John Hannibal Smith, commander of TV's The A-Team. No, George Lippard, different guy. So anyway, Lippard acknowledged the story of the mysterious order was made up. He was created as a sort of composite character to embody the mythos and the passions of the age. Now, many listeners will be familiar with, with the outlines and directions of this story if they listen to my two-part interview with Jared Yates Sexton in episodes 136 and 137. But if not, hang in there. Okay, So what? Who cares if a guy who would have thought that the National Treasure movies were documentaries fell for just another made-up story? Well, it turns out Hall's very short book about the legends of America's founding somehow found its way into the hands of the slightly dim and very superstitious star of such films as Little Miss Thoroughbred, Girls on Probation, and Murder in the Air. Remember at the beginning I said the story of a remarkable but obscure guy would lead us to a less remarkable and not at all obscure guy? Well, meet Ronald Reagan.
That's right. I forgot about this.
The not great actor who is widely considered the greatest president of the modern age by far too many people.
He was not.
And somehow is also widely believed to have been a good Christian man. Have you guys watched the 4-part Reagan documentary on Showtime?
No.
Not yet.
Oh my God, it's incredibly good, if enraging. And oh my God, it shows how past is indeed prologue. Reagan, while no bright light, was not half as anvil stupid or lazy as Trump, but the shadows they cast were very similar, from ignoring an exploding plague to stratospheric and needless military spending to waging war on the poor and people of color, et cetera, et cetera. But it's the Christian right's insistence that these two men had Christ-like, specifically Christian attributes that makes my blood pressure shoot up until my eyes spin like slot machines. We all know Donald Trump is exactly as Christian as my garage door opener is. Not at fucking all. And the same was true of Reagan. Yes, Reagan was raised a nominal Christian, and yes, he had at least a basic feel for the language of pandering to Christian America. But outside of a few photo op visits to a church or two, that, to Reagan's very tiny credit, did not require stormtroopers to gas and beat the shit out of people so he could hold a borrowed book he'd never read.
Upside down.
You know what? It wasn't.
Well,
how dare you?
I want it to be, but it wasn't upside down. Snopes is like, no, it wasn't upside down.
Doesn't matter, really.
So Ronald and his lovely wife, Nancy, were not remotely Christian at all. And I think it's super important we don't let that very important fact get lost in the fucking myth-making of the conservative pantheon the Reagans are installed in. The Reagans were occultists. Yes, occultists. While they were carried into office on the shoulders of evangelical America during the height of the satanic panic that saw many of their fellow occultists hated, hunted, despised, and even prosecuted by Reagan-loving Christians in this country that makes no goddamn sense at all. Yet, unlike Trump, Ronald, if not Nancy, believed in some sort of higher power. He believed in some kind of patrician God, whether or not he ever went to his church or prayed to him in any way. And Reagan saw America and the providence that had installed him to damn near destroy the place as proof of God's divine hand blessing America, and blessing America with he himself, a veteran of several war movies he would later confuse for actual military service, for which he claimed credit but never actually did. So Reagan cited Manly P. Hall's unsourced story of the mysterious hype man and the Declaration of Independence multiple times as if it were confirmed fact. And as we know from Reagan's son, Ron, who is featured prominently in the Showtime docuseries, he's actually kind of becomes the star of it. Very often Reagan fell for his own sunny myth-making, so he likely thought it was fact too. After all, Ronald Reagan is nothing if not a collection of comforting bromides about American exceptionalism brought to life by some white nationalist Geppetto. Mitch Horowitz, in his research on Manly P. Hall, has pretty good evidence that not only was Reagan taken with Hall's little book on treacly American magical folklore, but that the two had indeed met and possibly kept in contact during his governorship of California and later the presidency. And I mean, anyone is entitled to have whatever friends they like, but I would suspect the average evangelical Republican might find St. Ronnie's relationship with that sort of Eastern mystical Svengali troubling. And far more troubling, what the docuseries shows is that the grifting Nancy, who was probably the most powerful person in the country, if not the world, lurking behind her grinning frontman, was far deeper in the mystical quicksand, little nod to some of our listeners there, than Ronald ever was. Nancy had long consulted various high-profile and high-cost astrologers for just about every conceivable decision.
Right.
When she fomented the firing of Reagan's chief of staff, Don Reagan, who she openly despised, He wrote a tell-all book exposing her heroin-like dependency on celebrity soothsayers and palm readers,
Right.
the sort of thing Reagan's voting base then and now would label as satanic witchcraft. Now, in the documentary, you will meet astrologer Joan Quigley, who I would generously describe as looking like Kristen Wiig playing a very confused, out-of-breath 1980s celebrity astrologer.
Which why have we not seen that yet?
You can't believe this person is real when you see her in the documentary. She's such a caricature. Nancy consulted Quigley on things small and large, like what time a state dinner for the prime minister so-and-so should start, to where and when stupendously consequential nuclear arms talks with the Soviets would take place, down to the most auspicious minute for Air Force One to take off and land. So a crazy woman that the First Lady met on the fucking Merv Griffin show was tasked with looking up what house Jupiter was in and the retrogressive status of the planet Mercury to tell the credulous dope of a president when and how to discuss the fate of every living thing on Earth with the Russians. And she did this and discussed the flight patterns and landings and takeoff times of the plane with the president in it on an unsecured phone in her little Beverly Hills astrology shop at the height of the Cold War.
Jesus
Love
Christ.
it.
Yeah.
Love it.
It's a fucking miracle any of us survived this stupid, awful couple of shallow Reader's Digest small-time grifters.
I was really young when this story broke. I mean, I remember it, but I was too young to contextualize it or fully understand it. But younger listeners should go, because it is bananas
Yeah.
that this actually took place. It's crazy.
Yeah. Normally things like the location and time and everything of nuclear arms talks, that's all handled by the State Department and the Soviet side, right? Very serious stuff.
Yeah.
You're saying that somehow Nancy Reagan is not as important as the State Department when it comes to this sort of thing? I just find that.
I'm just saying no. But remember, the non-Christian Manly P. Hall-loving occultist Ronald Reagan ran against and beat the declared devoted Southern evangelical Christian Jimmy Carter.
I know.
Who I don't know about his health these days. He's kind of on the decline. But last I knew,
He's 112 years old. Leave him alone.
he builds houses and kills cancer, this motherfucker. Who anyway, until very recently, if he still doesn't do it to this day, teaches Sunday school every week in Plains, Georgia.
Yeah.
The utterly irreligious and vacuous Donald Trump smeared the declaredly Christian Barack Obama as exotic, not born in this country, un-American, and, well, black. Trump's evangelical Christian cultists, again, in the last election, ran to the polls to elect their new golden Moloch in order to prevent the lifelong, faithfully Catholic Christian Joe Biden as an un-American and un-Christian traitor. So, what does the story of Manly P. Hall, as told through the lens of Ron and Nancy Reagan, and ultimately Trump, tell us about the actual values of right-wing American Christianity? Is it that they cherish their stated values, that they wish to change all the laws in every state and the federal government to force the rest of us to live as they see fit? I think it demonstrates that they are willing to totally reorder and even tear down democracy to set up a Handmaid's Tale hellscape where we must live by their interpretations of the Bible, but not them so much, and their messianic leaders not at all. So that's Manly P. Hall and the grinning credulous occultist who loved him, you guys.
What do you think Melania consults or consulted during the was it the Slovenian blood cones that she put in the White House?
I saw that old Disney documentary where that woman would talk to the mirror and ask who was the fairest of all. I think actually Melania was pretty serious Catholic in her way.
Did Melania consult with anyone other than her divorce attorney? I feel like that's probably her guiding star.
Yeah.
How long do I have to stay with him until I can get all of the money that I want?
Yeah, and a lot of people had some sympathy for Melania, but then it kind of turned out she was just, A, she's just as awful as he is.
Yeah.
But B, she wielded a lot of power in the White House. So,
yeah.
They're both much, much stupider than the Reagans. But they're pretty similar. You know, they're TV personalities that didn't really know much of anything when they got into office and set about wrecking the place.
Wow.
So
Yeah. Well, okay, there you go. Name your kids manly, everybody. I think that's the real takeaway.
And cut bob their hair like a girl. All right. Well, that's enough of that. Let's move on.
Let's move on.